This is about de jure government. And I'd like to point out that I've got a Google group, if anybody's interested. It's called Administrating Your Public Servants at googlegroups.com. I also have a website. It's called, it's not this one. It's sovereigntyinternational.info. And I've also got a Facebook fan page. It's called www.facebook.com/sovereignlivingsouls, and that's got links to all this other stuff too. But anyways, we'll go ahead and start with this. Greetings from the Republic of Texas. I was Speaker of the House of Representatives for the Republic of Texas for about a year and a half. I currently have a diplomatic position with the Republic of Texas, and there are resources available to help you establish your de jure government. And what I'm going to do after the end of this is we have some people here from the Republic of Texas. They're going to have a few minutes to speak with you a little bit. Anyways, in Texas, you know, that's the de jure government here. Obviously not in Canada, but the point is that this is one thing that they learned in Texas, is that the de jure government was here all along. It's just nobody was operating it. It was like in abeyance or dormant. And and a bunch of people figured this out back in the 90s, and they started operating it. And they've certainly had their, you know, ups and downs and trials and things like that, and are still, you know, having trials. But the bottom line is that, and one thing we're going to learn today when we're going through this presentation is, if you want any real justice, that's where it's got to be. You're not going to get anything in their de facto courts. As a matter of fact, we'll show you here that there's no justice available. There's my commission. Canada is a municipal corporation domiciled in the District of Columbia. Income tax checks are made out to the Receiver General for Canada. The IRS is an agency of the International Monetary Fund, okay? So the United States is bankrupt. If you go to Dun & Bradstreet's website, you'll see, and I could pull it up for you, there's a United States of America 4 Corp. Okay, well, that tells me the first 3 were liquidated in bankruptcy, and we're on number 4. And oh man, what's with this? Here we go. This is the Canada SEC website that shows Canada's domicile in the District of Columbia. Now think of this. What we have is Indiana and Company, 3,460,000 stockholders engaged in providing peace, justice, security, opportunity, health, highways, education, conservation, recreation. And then if you look over on the side over here, it says certificate. Every Indiana citizen is a stockholder in 4,300 school buildings, 960 miles of highway, 34 state parks and memorials, and who knows what else. And so, and if you look at the bottom, it says report for fiscal year beginning July 1st, 1936 and ending June 30th, 1937. So what you have is a corporation. And so there's 2 Indianas, and the same thing is going on here in Texas or any other state. And so what happens when that thing goes bankrupt, okay? Well, then instead of every Indiana citizen being a stockholder, what happens? What happens to the stock? Does anybody know? Huh? The stocks become worthless. And who becomes the stockholders? The creditors. Who's the creditors? International Monetary Fund and the bankster thieves. And so they wind up owning this corporation. And so then what happens is, when any corporation goes bankrupt, this is actually taken from the Alberta Solicitor General's annual report, and I'll talk about this in a second. When any corporation goes bankrupt, then the creditors become the owners, and the stock becomes worthless. It's effectively a coup d'etat. You think about it, okay? The creditors just took over, and now they got to make some money, okay? This is taken from the Alberta Solicitor General's annual report. This is interesting. It says Correctional Services Division expenditures of $19.7 million. That included $17.5 million for salary settlements, as well as $2.2 million increased supplies services costs for news programs, community corrections, one-time cost due to closure of this youth offender center. Well, this is interesting. Now, notice it says salary settlements. So they're telling they're not really paying anything. It's a settlement, okay, number one. Number two, it doesn't say anything about jails there. So who do you think is paying for the jails? Who do you think is paying for the jails? Well, no, it's not the taxpayers. I mean, if it was the taxpayers, it'd be in this report, because the Solicitor General handles that stuff. No, no. It's the bonds from the prisoners. They're paying for their own jail. And the jails are probably all private. It's like, you know, the Archbishop of Canterbury owns all the jails in England. I don't know if you knew that. That's true. The Archbishop of Canterbury, who is the head of the Church of England, owns all the jails in England. Brooks. Okay, so what happens when any corporation becomes bankrupt? The original stock becomes worthless, the creditors become owners, it's effectively a coup d'etat. Who are the creditors for Canada or United States? It's the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. The courts have ruled on numerous occasions that the primary responsibility of the officers of any corporation is to the owners of the corporation. All courts, cities, towns, etc. in Canada and United States are municipal corporations that are sub-corporations of the municipal corporation called Canada or United States, as applicable. The creditors of these bankrupt corporations, the international banksters, operate exclusively under private international law. Other names for private international law include, but are not limited to, Admiralty Maritime Law, civil law, canon law, martial law. And we're going to go through court cases that talk about this. The Magna Carta was signed by the tyrant King John in 1215 and 1213. King John swore allegiance to the Vatican with the concessions to the Pope. Look it up on the internet. I've seen Israeli court cases to say that this goes back to the Babylonian Empire. Government is not reason, it is not eloquence, it is force. It is a dangerous servant and a terrible master. All governments operate under martial law. It is the responsibility of we, the people, to keep our government under control. We are under martial law. There's three kinds of martial law. This is taken from that Diet versus Turner, that non-ratification of the 14th Amendment by this Judge H. Ellett, the Utah Supreme Court. Send me an email, I'll send it to you. Anyways, it's about 150 pages, but it's double-spaced. It's an easy read. There's three kinds of martial law. There's full martial law, there's martial law proper, and there's martial law rule. There's full martial law is when a declaration of martial law is issued, troops are put on the street. It's used only during wartime. It's used on foreign country when actually invaded by a foreign power or put down an armed rebellion. Martial law proper is law of the armed forces. It's when a captain tells a private what to do. It's enforced by court-martials. Martial law rule is the law of necessity and emergency. Allows the domestic use of martial law powers, and it's used during peace times. Evidence of martial law rule. Military script is circulated for money. This action of Congress and passage of the first Legal Tender Act was placed distinctly upon the ground of the existing imperative need of government, and the Legal Tender Clause was urged and adopted as a war measure. Martial law. Military script is a forced loan. The forced loans of 1862 and 1863 in the form of legal tender notes were vital forces in the struggle for national supremacy. They form a part of the public debt of the United States. Since March 9, 1933, the United States has been in a state of declared national emergency. Under the powers delegated by these statutes, the President may seize property, organize and control the means of production, seize commodities, assign military forces abroad, institute martial law, seize and control all transportation and communication, regulate the operation of private enterprise, restrict travel, and in a plethora of particular ways control the lives of all American citizens. A majority of the people of the United States have lived all their lives under emergency rule. For 40 years, freedoms and governmental procedures guaranteed by the Constitution have in varying degrees been abridged by laws brought into force by states of national emergency. And this is taken from the U.S. Senate Report number 93-549 dated November 19th, 1973. So, you think anything's changed? Absolutely not. Yeah, no joke. War is not carried on by arms alone. It is lawful to starve the hostile belligerent, armed or unarmed, so that it leads to the speedier subjection of the enemy. Article 17, the Lieber Code. The exercise of the martial law jurisdiction within the several states is the usurpation of common law and subjects the sovereign body to a jurisdiction that has no right to exist within the states. If a citizen acquires the same legal status, artificial character, as those protected by the amendment through the operation of some statutory law of Congress, then said citizen may be brought within the venue of the amendment as a statutory juristic person. By this means, citizens' birthrights become of no effect, and their rights are reduced to the inferior character of statutory civil rights, mere legislative privileges. Okay, and then Federal Reserve notes are military script. Federal Reserve notes are legal tender. Federal Reserve notes are forced loans. Anyone who uses them is forced to loan the government money. Think about it. Federal Reserve notes are promissory notes. When you pay for something with the promissory note, you create a usufruct. If the debt of the United States was paid off, there'd be no paper money in circulation. If you look at Title 12, United States Code, Section 411, it says that Federal Reserve notes are evidence of the debt of the United States. Evidence of martial law rule. Income taxes collected under military authority. Government seizes money without a court order. Government seizes property without a court order. Government seizes bank accounts without a court order. Is that going on? Heck yes.